All right. Good evening. Tonight is March 25th, 2026. Welcome to the West Haven Planning Commission. We are going to call this meeting to order, and we're going to have opening ceremonies with Commission Member Jensen giving the Pledge of Allegiance, and I will be giving a prayer moment of silence. Okay. He's the quiet type.
Repeat after me.
I followed.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Our Heavenly Father, we thank you for this opportunity to come together as a planning commission. We ask that you guide us as we make decisions that affect this community. We are very, very grateful for our military and our first responders, and we ask that you watch over each and every one of them. And we ask these things in Jesus' name. Amen.
Amen.
All right. Item number 3, action on minutes. Does anybody have anything? All right. If there's nothing, I will entertain a motion.
I'll make a motion to approve the minutes from the meeting from March 11th, 2026.
Thank you.
I'll second.
All right. We have a motion and a second. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? All right, motion carries. Item number 4, reports, actions taken by the city council and other items. Stephen?
Thank you. The council at the last meeting didn't have much to report on other than I wanted to thank everybody for coming to the joint session at 5. I felt like that we got a lot of good feedback, and we're currently working on an update to the economic strategic master plan right now. I had a conversation with our consultant earlier this week about some of those updates, and we should have them done here shortly. I don't have an exact date when they'll be back to me. But after they come back, we'll plan on bringing them to the Planning Commission as a workshop first, and then depending on how that goes, then we'll move to a public hearing. So we'll be seeing that here at the Planning Commission in the month of April. Whether it's the first or second meeting, I don't know at this point. Then the next item is just, we have another joint workshop next week to cover the land use segment of the general plan. So it'll be next week on Wednesday at 5 o'clock. There will be an online option again as well. We met with our consultant today and reviewed kind of what the plan for going through it. I think there's going to be some good information presented. So, and that's everything I have.
All right. Thank you, Stephen. Item number 5, discussion, home occupation enforcement, West Haven Code Enforcement Officer. Mr. Tanner, would you like to come up to the microphone? Or do you want to give us a little bit of,
Maybe a quick introduction.
yeah, just a quick,
So some of you don't know, Dan Tanner, he's our code enforcement officer. He also does stormwater inspections, and he also does our emergency management. He's a man of many talents. And at our last meeting, we were talking about our home occupation code, and there was questions particularly revolve around auto body shops and home occupation, about code enforcement issues and problems that have arisen from existing uses. And so the Planning Commission requested that we invite Dan to our next meeting, which would be this meeting, to be able to come and talk about some of those experiences, any problems that we've had, and to answer any questions that the commission might have for him. So,
okay, thank you. You don't look like you want to give a speech, Mr.
No, I don't.
You're
Open for any questions, and
questions.
I'll certainly give you some answers. Just a precursor, obviously, any information I'll share with you are from my personal experiences here with West Haven City, but I also am part of another alliance in Northern Utah as a group of code enforcement officers in northern Utah that we come together. And so some information is gathered information from code enforcement in our area as it relates to, certain things. So I can come from a perspective of experience, but also from what other cities are experiencing. So-
Okay. Well, thank you. I know that one of the big ones that I had to do with home occupations in R1 zones primarily. And how it is that you're dealing with it and the kind of problems and issues that you might be having in terms of automotive repair, those kinds of things. Maybe you could tell us a little more about that.
Well, the majority of the complaints are in relation to what I refer to as continuity of the community. How does the business affect that continuity in the neighborhood and the natural look of the neighborhood? And so a lot of the complaints are about how that is, as far as the amount of cars, the noises that come from it, the constant traffic in and out. Those are all part of a complaint that we receive here. Where's the business being conducted? What kind of restrictions does the city have as far as, where they can do that and how big the lot has to be? All those things are all questions I receive in regards to an automotive repair home occupation.
What kind of difficulty do you have in being able to enforce some of our codes as it relates to noise, traffic, that kind of thing?
Really no issues with it. Other than, some of the things I don't see because it gets cleared up before I get there based on the complaint. But the biggest complaint is that they don't feel like it's an appropriate home occupation in a residential neighborhood. They feel like that's something that should be a commercial application, and that, the unnecessary noise, the unnecessary traffic, the additional cars located in the neighborhood, they just feel like it's not an appropriate application in the neighborhood. And that's a lot of the comments I get is just based on, why is that allowed? So.
Is there an ordinance or guideline, like, does it need to be behind a fence or surrounded by a fence or?
The ordinance doesn't really have a lot of specifications in it. And it's one that I believe I gave to the planner, Mr. Rodriguez, in regards to recommendations. But it does have a acreage requirement, has to be an acre or more, has to be done in a shop. And then I think there's some requirements as far as the vehicles on the lot. And so those are what are regulating it right now. And for the most part, conversations with people that are running those type of businesses they're in compliance. As much as I can see, like I said, sometimes I get calls and I get out there and things have changed, and so I don't get an opportunity to find the non-compliances. So
those that were grandfathered in, is it pretty much they have free reign to do whatever since it was?
well, grandfathered is kind of a difficult thing because it's grandfathered, then there's grandfathered by means of some land use appeal that has been done. So when we look at grandfathered, we have to go back to what it was, and that's still the same thing. The size of the lot and how many cars. So those type of things, the grandfather ones, unfortunately, because it's, it was granted before any, additional conditions were put in. They're allowed to operate that way until such time as they cease doing business.
Yeah, there are.
Then anybody who would move into it then would have to come in compliance with the new ordinance. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I was gonna say, just when something is a legal non-conforming use or grandfathered in, a lot of times all that entitles them to is the terms and conditions at time of approval.
Right.
And so it doesn't necessarily protect them from other ordinances or regulations. So there's a lot of times still noise ordinances that were in place at the time of approval or other nuisance ordinances. So a lot of times they still have to comply with that. It does occasionally make it more difficult when they're legal non-conforming because you have to do a little research and see what was in place, what the conditions were at time of approval. But it doesn't necessarily, it's not a blanket protection. There's still some things that we can do, but it is limited.
Stephen is right that, you know, we still have the nuisance on property, which protects us from accumulation of tires, that protects us from, you know, accumulation of other unsightly things that are part of a different ordinance that aren't part of the home occupation. Because the expectation is that they would stay in compliance with all ordinances of the city. And so I do get calls for noise. I do get calls for accumulation of tires. I do get calls for, I've had some problems with their equipment stuff being impeding on other people's properties, trash, you know, just unsightly conditions. I do get those and obviously enforce those separate from their home occupation.
Anybody else have any other questions? I guess one of the other ones I'm concerned with, we talked about it a little bit last week, and that would be the traffic part of it. People testing vehicles after being repaired, that sort of thing, and going
Correct.
up and down the streets.
Mhm.
Can I assume that you get calls for that, or does that mostly go to the sheriff's department?
Well, I do get those and I do pass those to the sheriff's department as it mostly of the time it involves speeds. You know, you can't say that somebody taking out a car and racing a little bit is any different than an unmufflered Harley Davidson going down the road. And so it's tough. And because it's a monetary or momentary sound and not a consistent sound, it's hard to regulate with a noise ordinance. But it doesn't mean it's a permitted thing to just continually race around the neighborhood. So when we get those type of calls and comments, I typically turn to the sheriff department to look at and to monitor any information as far as, you know, style or place or something. All that information is turned over to the sheriff's department. So probably one of the other items, just how many vehicles that they collect, and that's all, and you know, subject to interpretation of what is what. If there's a challenge, it's to make sure that the intent of the ordinance is crystal clear about whether it's state or whatever, that it's the intent is the number of cars, period, regardless of the purpose that is there. That way it's easy for me to drive by and say, okay, the amount is only 3 outside the shop. And 3 is a number. And if there's 4, then I can go say, okay, you're outside of the conditions of your business license. You need to get it there. So they need to know that they can't just bring in 12 cars and say, well, only 3 of them are whatever. It's got to stay within a specific intended amount of cars so that it doesn't have a negative impact on the neighborhood. 3 cars is probably not a big deal, but 12 cars has a substantial difference.
I know you get complaints on this one that I'm specifically thinking of, which is well over 20 cars there all the time. But they also have like a transport trailer kind of part on between the road and the fence or the road and the yard. Is there anything that's, sorry, is there anything that can avoid that? Just the one right over here. I'm sure you know what it is.
I know which one you're referring to, and I do follow up on all of our businesses like that I've had complaints on, just to make sure they're in compliance. The city ordinance says that if you have a vehicle parked on the city's right of way, you know, it has to move every 48 hours. And so if it's far enough out of the right of way and it's on their soft shoulder on their property, then no, the city doesn't have any way to regulate that. That particular property, because of its legal non-conforming and that gain, it's legal right now for that property. So there's not a lot that can be done specifically for the one
Right.
I think you're the one you're referring to. I do, like I said, monitor all those properties that have that kind of a business with the expectation of making sure that they stay within the conditions that were granted when they got their license. So,
Anybody else have any questions?
Yeah, Dan, I don't know if you can maybe quantify this or just give us some kind of a rough idea, but did you find yourself doing more enforcement in one like A or R zoned areas or?
well, the zoning requirements is 1 acre or more, and it doesn't necessarily, I don't believe it's by zone, it's by size of the property. So whether it's agricultural or residential, it's about the size of the property.
Yeah, I was just trying to get a sense if the agricultural folks tend to be a little more lenient or less aggravated by neighbors doing things than maybe somebody in a residential zone might be.
Well,
And
I'm
do you
gonna.
see that in
yeah.
your enforcement.
Well, I'll tell you that we have some agricultural zone neighborhoods that should be residentially zoned neighborhoods because of the size of the lots and the development of the neighborhood. It is fully developed like a residential neighborhood, but it's zoned agricultural years and years ago. And we're not wanting to go in and make that change. And so a lot of our subdivisions that are in the agricultural zone are really like residential ones, and there's really not one that has more issues than the other versus residential versus agricultural because they're classified the same. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
I would say, I believe most of like our auto bodies or kind of landscape companies, those that are
Right.
doing home occupation, just because of the lot size
Right.
requirement, a lot of them do end up falling in the A1 zone.
Yeah, they
But
do.
as Dan mentioned, a lot of those are within kind of subdivided neighborhoods on lots that are typically on average 0.9 acres or greater.
Mhm.
You will typically find this type of thing in a more of an agricultural because they typically have the bigger lots. Let it out.
Hey, Dan, I got a question for you.
Sure.
Is there anything we should add in your mind? I want to pick your brain and speak for you, but as you go around and enforce these different covenants and laws, whatever, do you see that we could lighten things up or stiffen them up in certain areas, or like mechanical shops or auto body has been mentioned, any of those home businesses?
Right.
Do you think we should improve, or we good? What do you think?
Well, I'll give you two opinions.
Okay.
Because I'll give you the collective opinion of this alliance that I'm part of, that that this type of business is just not conductive to the continuity community. It just doesn't blend in with it, and that's why we have so many questions. Why is this allowed in a residential agricultural development? And so a lot of them will say not allowed. If you go into some cities, you do your research, you'll find that some cities don't allow it at all.
Right.
It is because we are a rural community and we have some larger lots that can permit it. I would impose conditions that lessen the impact
Okay.
on the neighborhood. And I made those recommendations to Damien, meaning they always have to operate with their doors closed. They
Okay.
have to have business hours, so they're not ratcheting, at 10 o'clock at night.
Sure.
Because the noise ordinance goes from 7 in the morning till 10 o'clock at night. But I think out of, again, respect and the continuity of the neighborhood, that it would make sense to have that be during a standard operating hours, 8 to 6 or
Sure.
whatever, so that it doesn't really have as much impact on the neighborhood. All equipment that would make any kind of substantial noise, like compressors or things like that, that they be installed on the inside of the structure.
Yeah.
So that they would not obviously create the problems of the noise for the neighbors. And then just be more specific in the language on how many vehicles.
Hmm,
Like,
okay.
like that's probably one of the largest concerns about these is one, that they don't like it in the neighborhood, and two, they don't like
Sure.
the amount of cars
Yeah.
that are handled on the property. And I've always believed, I don't know how many cars you can work on at one time.
Yeah.
But if you've got a 3-bay garage, you can have 3 in the garage and 3 outside, and hallelujah. But if you're gonna one, I'm sorry, you've got to gauge your business based on
Sure.
what an ordinance would allow. So I feel from what I gather from the citizens and what they would have the concerns about is hours of operating with the door closed, limit on how many cars.
Yeah.
So
Thank you.
that makes sense.
Yeah. Thank you. That was great.
How much difference do you think it makes in a steel building to have the doors closed versus having them opened? Is there that much difference in the volume?
There is, the decibel readings that are in the noise ordinance are very specific, and you take any type of barrier, typically metal is a really good muffler. Wood is probably better than that because it absorbs better. But any type of structure that, like an air compressor or a wrench that you hear with the air compressor, would make a high-pitched whine, and an enclosure helps to reduce that, so that when I come out and do a measurement where I'm required to at the property line, it's amazing how having that door closed really has an effect, or inside that structure really has an effect on the decibel readings I get when I go do a measurement.
All right, thank you.
So
Anybody else? All right, thank you, Dan. We're going to talk about this a little later on, so it's kind of an unusual agenda.
oh no, happy to come and speak to anything you need.
All right, thank you.
Okay,
Yeah, enjoy your evening.
I will. Thank you.
All right, item number 6, presentation on public hearing to amend City Code 156056, street and alley width, cul-de-sacs, easements of subdivision ordinance. Steve,
I got.
oh, it's yours, okay.
Yep. Okay. Thank you. So this is the first time you're seeing this. Typically, we prefer to do a workshop on most of our ordinances. However, our city attorney advised me just to get this written into public hearing. And it's a small, though relatively, it's a small change, but relatively important. And so that's why we decided just to jump right into the public hearing section, or just public hearing process, instead of taking this to the Planning Commission first. So what the proposal is currently under our subdivision ordinance, when a developer builds out a roadway or any type of development, they have the ability to put a protection strip along the property boundary. For those of you who are unaware, a protection strip typically is, a small sliver of property, normally a foot, but sometimes can be greater, that is put between improvement and an adjacent property. The idea behind these is it allows for when a developer goes through and puts a lot of money into infrastructure, it then allows that developer to require the adjacent property owner to pay for part of those improvements. So in order to access the public improvements, they have to go through the holder of the protection strip, which would typically be the initial developer. And so they'd be reimbursed somewhat for those improvements. However, these are problematic. There can be issues with them. And that's what we're currently running into right now with some protection strips within the city. And We've talked for a little bit about getting this removed, and we've decided we just need to do it. And so a couple of the issues that arise with these, and I have this in the report, so I'll go through the couple points I made there, is this first allows a private property owner to control access to public infrastructure. This can be, it's public infrastructure. And generally speaking, the public should have access to that infrastructure through the city and through the development process. And so this provides a third party to control when that access is given. There's also concerns about equity in access. There are, as stated, the reason behind this was to allow for a property owner to be able to be recouped for their initial development cost. That benefits an adjacent property owner. However, almost every developer benefits from what a past developer has done. There's almost always some developer or the city in some cases that has brought utilities or roadways or other infrastructure to a property boundary that they benefit from. And so creating a protection strip alters who wins and who loses those type of games with maybe unforeseen consequences. There's also issue, and one of the current issues we're running into is administering and facilitating the elimination of these protection strips. Part of the reason is that this is not held by the city. The city does not control these protection strips. They're owned privately. And typically what they're supposed to happen is there's supposed to be terms that are recorded with the protection strip that kind of states how much is owed, but that doesn't always happen. And then even if it does happen, sometimes they'll dispute those terms when time comes. And so this kind of covers item number 4 in there as well. This often calls the city in to mediate and spend time trying to help both navigate these hurdles that are really a private matter. So it ends up costing the city money to facilitate the relinquishing of these. And then the last one is it's become pretty standard for most cities not to allow these within the state. It was pretty common that these were allowed several years ago, but most cities, because of the issues I've talked about and probably many others, have decided to do away with them and make them illegal to create within the subdivision process. And so all that being said, as I mentioned, because of some current issues that we're dealing with, the city attorney has asked myself to compose an ordinance and bring it to the Planning Commission to modify that section. So where we're looking at, this is in 156.056. As stated on the agenda, under subsection J. I won't go through this whole paragraph, but it essentially states that where a subdivision streets parallel contiguous property of the owner of the subdivider may retain a protection strip with the approval of the city attorney under terms approved by the city. And as mentioned, that has kind of happened in some cases, and sometimes the protection strip has been recorded or the terms have been altered and has been kind of put out of our control. So what we're proposing is to essentially eliminate that whole paragraph, and not only eliminate it, but then provide language that prohibits protection strips. So the addition would be that protection or holding strips, namely a narrow strip of land used to separate and control access to property, shall not be allowed. End of section. And so what we're recommending today is that the Planning Commission, that we hold the public hearing and the Planning Commission consider the changes. And if the Planning Commission feels appropriate, we would recommend that the Planning Commission recommend to the City Council to approve the update.
Okay, thank you, Stephen. Anybody have any questions for Stephen before we? All right. If-
So I have a question. So I'm trying to wrap my head around this thing, and this is 2 parcels of private property, right? And then the city is gonna get involved and dictate what can happen with that private property.
Well, as kind of stated, it puts the city in an awkward situation because oftentimes we are called upon not necessarily to dictate, but more to mediate um, conflicts. Because essentially, you have one property owner that wants to connect onto public infrastructure, but then you have a third party who controls a sliver of land that's between the two properties. And oftentimes, at least in a couple cases that we're currently dealing with, there were certain terms that the city said, this is what you have to do. And then right now, the couple of the property owners involved are disputing those initial terms. And so it has pulled city staff in to try to, particularly Amy, has pulled her in to mediate those conversations.
So there again, that's
Could,
a dispute between two private properties.
Correct.
Commissioner, could you turn on your microphone? Sorry to interrupt.
Okay, no, thank you. I'm glad you did. There again, to me, it seems like, well, it's a dispute between two private parties and the city's intervening to mediate.
Correct.
So I don't get that any more than if I have one of those car repair shops repair my car, and then I say, well, wait a minute, you didn't do it right. That's not fair. Well, let's go have the city mediate it because you got the business license from the city to be doing car repairs. It makes no sense.
There are
to
definitely,
me, the city would get involved at all in it. And I
Yeah.
see the developer wanting to recoup his costs for putting in those infrastructure. I've got a neighbor that spent 20 grand putting in infrastructure in storm drain 6, 8, 10 years ago. The city said he had to put in to develop his property as the cul-de-sac was extended. And then he was under the impression, well, I'll just recoup this from everybody that down the line that's going to tap into it. And then a year later, the rights for that storm drain that he put in and spent 20,000 on 10 years ago were turned over to the city, and the city,
yeah. And I think,
so I see the developer or the person, whoever it is, putting in that infrastructure, wanting to recoup his costs for that infrastructure being put in. And I see him having the only ability to do that is if he puts in that protection strip. So I'm just trying to understand how this guy that has this piece of property that somebody else paid to put in the street, put in the curb and gutter, put in the sewer, put in the storm drain, and a freeloader taps into it at no cost to him. How does he recoup his money if we do this?
and there are a couple, and I actually think this is one reason why we have protection strips is currently our code requires that if you build a street on the edge of a subdivision, you have to build out the full right of way. And that's common, but maybe not universal. A lot of times half streets or streets up to curb and gutter are required because of that issue. But I think for this one and kind of how the code is currently worded is it really puts the city in the position of mediation. Like this one specifically states that the city shall facilitate the removal of the protection strip. And so within the terms of that strip itself, the city has some obligation to help facilitate those negotiations, ensure they happen. And the other issue that we're involved, maybe more so than like what your example is of the car dealer, is that's not, if it was private infrastructure, then that would be one thing, but it's public infrastructure. It's infrastructure the city owns, maintains, and operates. And under typical situations, somebody can connect into that infrastructure. And I understand the idea of kind of fairness to the developer who put in the initial cost. But as stated, there's oftentimes those developers also benefit from other improvements that have been put in. And so that's why staff is proposing just eliminating it altogether, because we feel like it does create, you're right, in theory, there is some equity, but I think in practice, it doesn't always end up like that.
So in theory, in the example that I used from my neighbor putting in the storm drain that ran down the back of the lots and not in the street, then there is no provision for him to ever recoup his costs, even though the city required him to run about a 650-foot storm drain.
Yeah. And I guess it kind of also comes down to there are actually another option that we could explore that's not prohibited in our code, which is a form of a development agreement, often referred to as a pioneering agreement. And I'm assuming that's probably what your neighbor had, where it wasn't a protection strip, but some sort of an agreement entered in with the city that connection onto some sort of infrastructure within a given period of time would have to the developer would have to pay the city, who would reimburse the initial developer. Those are common and have been put in place. However, I think what it really comes down to for the equity question is by constitutional law and state code, the city can only require only require them to make improvements based on what is a reasonable impact of their development. And so is it reasonable for us to require a developer to build a roadway so that their properties can access off? And if that's reasonable, then they have to do that in order to accommodate the impact of their development. And if it's not reasonable, or the other consideration is whether or not there's a direct impact of that development on that infrastructure. And so as we review those two things, if something is unreasonable, that beyond the scope of that development's impact, then that's often when the city gets involved to either waive impact fees or build out the roadway ourselves, or all the different things that we can do or will do in some cases.
But that's entirely separate from
Correct.
them putting the infrastructure in and blocking out a landowner from accessing it.
Correct.
So I just, I just see us as making this difficult for a developer to recoup the cost of infrastructure in some instances. And the
Yeah.
notion that, well, they make it up someplace else where they got something. I don't like that either. They shouldn't make it up someplace else where they got something they shouldn't have got.
Yeah, I know what you're saying, and it will that is probably the biggest drawback, is it
Yeah.
potentially causes some developers to have to pay more for improvements and others to have maybe free ride might be too hard of a term, but could ride off the coattails of the other developer.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you.
Yep.
All right, if there's nothing else for Stephen, I'll entertain a motion to enter public hearing to solicit public input to amend City Code 156056, street and alley width, cul-de-sacs, easements of the subdivision ordinance.
I'll make a motion to enter into public hearing.
Yeah, I'll second that. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? All right, we're in public hearing in case anybody out there, do we have anybody online? Okay. Anybody in the audience want to speak to this? Nah, okay. I'll entertain a motion to leave public hearing.
I'll make a motion to leave public hearing.
I'll second.
All right. All in favor?
Aye.
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 Any opposed? All right. We are out of public hearing. I don't know if we want to discuss anything else about it, but it says discussion and action. Anybody? All right. With that, I'll entertain a motion.
I'll make a motion to approve. I'll make a motion to recommend approval of the proposed changes to the subdivision standards contained within West Haven City Code 156.056, street and alley widths, cul-de-sacs, easements as provided.
I'll second that. We have a motion and a second. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed?
Nay.
Nay.
Did you get who that was? George and Melinda? All right. All right. Item number 9 has been pulled at the request of the applicant. So we're on to item number 10, and I believe that is Damien, correct? Or am I-
Actually, that's me.
Is that Stephen again?
Yep.
Oh, you're batting 1,000.
I know. I'm over everything.
Yeah, thank you. So item number 10 is a preliminary plan and a flag lot application for a property located at 2817 South, 2700 West. Many of you will remember last year, almost a full year ago, back in May of 2025. Actually, I think the Planning Commission saw this in April, but the applicant came in and requested a zone change from A1 or A2 to R2 with the express purpose of being able to create a flag lot on this property to be able to subdivide it and create a lot in the back. That ordinance was approved by the council in May of 2025. And now the applicant is here with a flag lot request. As many of you might have seen, the applicant provided an update based off the staff report that was emailed out to the Planning Commission yesterday and is printed out in front of you in case you didn't see that. Maybe just to highlight the primary change on it is one of our conditions and findings was that the setbacks were oriented at the wrong direction. Essentially, by code, the setbacks were the front setback and would have to be on the east side of the property. And the original plan showed it on the south side. So they have flipped the setbacks around. So now the front is on the east, rear is on the west in order to comply with our report. So my plan is, so flag lots, so maybe just to jump in, flag lots are allowed as a special exception by the Planning Commission if they meet the terms listed within the code. And there are several terms, I don't remember the exact number, but it's A through, is it S? Yes, A through S, however many terms those are. So staff reviewed these and went through and found that the plan materially complies with the code and the standards listed within that section of code. There are a couple items that I wanted to talk about a little bit more in detail and then answer any questions about any. So I probably won't go through each term, but I will talk about some of the bigger ones. So the first term is under A, the Planning Commission determines that it's not feasible or desirable to extend a street to serve such a lot or lots at the time. So after review, this staff has found and would recommend that they're finding that there is insufficient room to provide a roadway or public street along the property to access the back part of the lot. And so that a private drive is probably the only feasible way to develop the lot as it's currently proposed. The second term, item number B, is the right-of-way or access shall have a minimum width of 20 feet and a maximum width of 30 feet and a maximum grade of 15%. So essentially what that means is your flag lot, one of the reasons it's called a flag lot is because it looks like a flag on a pole, is that you have a stem that goes out to the right-of-way and then the lot widens out into the flag portion at the where the home sits. And so our code requires that that stem is somewhere between 20 and 30 feet wide, mostly for fire access reasons, with a 30-foot max in order to excuse me, and a 30-foot max to try to keep the frontages not to, so they essentially don't create like a 50 or 60-foot frontage on a lot that just has kind of a, kind of weird frontage, kind of keep the street uniform and access uniform. And so the applicant has provided a 20-foot access, all-weather access as shown. On the parcel, as you'll see on the south end, there is parcel A, which is proposed to be dedicated to the city as part of this subdivision. Our trails master plan has a trail system that runs parallel to the slough, which lies along the southern portion of their property. And so after some discussion with our parks and city manager and the rest of the development review committee, and looking at kind of our standard for what we require typically for trail dedication, which is normally 20 feet, and talking to the applicant, we required them to do a 20-foot dedication along the slough for the future, for maintenance of the slough and the stormwater capacity that it typically provides, and also for the future construction of the trail, which will not be included as the part of this project. We also requested that as part of that dedication, that as part of their all-weather access drive, that they provide an easement for the city in case we need to provide heavier vehicles down the slough to do maintenance. And so that's why you'll see that on the very south, you see about a 20-foot parcel, that a 20-foot wide parcel that goes along the whole stretch. And then you'll see their property with the 20-foot access easement or the access strip. And so that is a little bit unique, but we found that it met that section of the code. So a couple of other things to consider. Yeah.
Before you go on, is there an existing easement that goes with that slough?
There is, as far my understanding is there's not a recorded easement. There's more of a prescriptive right to go in and maintain it.
So the city currently has no easement through Buttermilk Slough.
That's my understanding. There's no recorded document. We have a prescriptive right, essentially a right to access because we have been doing the maintenance on it. But my understanding is there's not an actual recorded easement. And so this subdivision, when recorded, would actually not only dedicate that slough property to the city, but would in addition provide us an access easement.
So I guess I'm, again, not understanding exactly what you're saying. So we've got an easement, or don't we have an easement to do maintenance on that slough currently?
Yeah, so it's a good question. So my understanding is we don't have any recorded easements. So there's nothing at the county that describes an easement along the slough for us to access it. But
So we don't have the right currently to access that to do maintenance.
so what I do believe we have is a prescriptive right, which is a right that's not officially recorded, but a right in history. Essentially, the city has access to maintain the slough over a historic period of time, and therefore can continue to access it even though there's not a recorded easement. Typically, when this happens and there's a development along these type of facilities, we like to record those easements to guarantee those rights and to leave any confusion in the future. Because right now, a prescriptive right doesn't show up like in a title report or anything like that, but a recorded easement will.
So this prescriptive easement that we currently have, does it have a defined width? Does it have a defined area? It's just an easement.
Correct. There's no definition in it. Essentially, typically a prescriptive easement is determined as what the historic access has been and their historic needs. And so those aren't normally defined per se. And if there's disputes, it's normally determined in a court by what is reasonable, what historically has been needed.
So what are current maintenance easements that
So-
we have that are recorded? What's the width of those?
It depends a little bit. Typically, we like to see about 20 feet. That allows for heavier equipment, like a backhoe, for example. You can sometimes see something smaller, but 20 feet is uh, normally what we want when we're looking for some sort of access.
Okay.
Okay. Thank you. Those are really good questions. Thank you. So the next section is the zoning on the property. So the zoning currently is R2, as kind of mentioned above. But the surrounding property is still A2. So within the R2 zone, the minimum lot size has to be 17,000 square feet. So within a flag lot, that square footage can't include the access stem. The lot has to be that size independent of the stem. And so currently their proposed lot is, or for lot 1, they're showing that the lot is 32,210 square feet. And lot 2, the total size is about 23,000 square feet, but the actual portion excluding the staff or the right-of-way access is 17,233 square feet. So that would meet that standard. Under E, that's where I had some of the largest findings and corrections. However, the latest plan that has been submitted has addressed that. Essentially, that the front setback has to be oriented towards the access easement, where it butts the access easement, and so that would be on the east side, which would then require rear setback on the west side. And the applicant has addressed those in the most recent update. So under F, the lot address is required to be displayed prominently. This is for emergency access. So if an ambulance is coming down the road and they have to respond, or a fire truck has to respond to this home, that there's an address listed on the street so they know how to access the property. So there is a note on the plat that addresses that concern. So one of the other items is when I'm going to jump down to they've met a lot of the other they've met all the other conditions. They have submitted a plan to fire, which is required in L and a couple other of the other sections, and those have been reviewed by the fire and approved with a couple conditions. Going down to section N, road services on private right-of-ways or private access shall be capable of supporting a 20-ton weight capacity with a surface approved by the city engineer. So the applicant's plan is to provide an all-weather surface that has an 8-inch depth of compacted road base. 8-inch is the standard for the type of access. However, our engineer has recommended occasionally, in some circumstances, 8 inches might not be suitable. However, you need a geotech study to determine that. So our engineer has recommended, as part of his approval, is that during the construction or prior to construction, that they perform a geotech on the roadway or where the roadway will be to determine whether 8 inches is adequate, but 8-inch depth needs to be the minimum. Okay, let's see. Then I do want to point out in S, so this essentially, R and S talk about frontage requirements. Essentially, the lot has to maintain the same width as lots in the zone as their frontage. So currently, the property does meet that standard. There is kind of a section in S that has 150 foot listed out. I talked to the property currently is 150 feet, but after the dedication of the property, that takes away 20 feet of that. However, after reviewing this with Amy, our opinion is that previously the requirements within the zones, the minimum frontage was 150 feet. But since zoning has changed and has been reduced, we believe that essentially this is a leftover that wasn't addressed, and that the proper interpretation is that that the lot just has to meet the zoning minimum frontage uh, of the zone. And so based on that discussion and with our attorney, staff has found that it does meet that standard. So the fire has also reviewed this. That was included. They approved the proposed plan with two conditions. One, that any driveway access that is longer than 150 feet, the driveway access shall be a minimum of 20 feet wide with an approved fire turnaround at the end. The driveway surface shall be approved surface capable of supporting the imposed load of fire apparatus up to 75,000 pounds according to National Fire Code. So they have provided all of that, but that would have to be for construction. That needs to also be signed off by fire. And then then their second condition is when a home is proposed, a fire hydrant need to be added to meet fire code standards. And so the applicant is aware of those, and when construction comes, they'll have to confer with fire to see if they need to run an 8-inch line down the road. So those are our findings with the flag lot. When you jump down to the subdivision code, I provided a list from our code and found that it substantially complies with those requirements. We did note, and this is mostly a note for the applicant, just for the applicant's information, is a note on utilities and other improvements that after the preliminary approval, the applicant will have to turn in full construction and civil improvement drawings, as our code defines it, but construction and civil drawings of their utilities, they'll have to do some improvements to 2700 West, and including providing curb, gutter, and sidewalk and roadway expansion, and they'll have to do that in conformance with our subdivision code. And that's something that we'll look for during the construction, during the next process, during this improvement drawings application. And so based on our findings, staff recommends that the Planning Commission approve the application. We did provide a couple conditions of approval. The first condition, they have met with the update. So we would recommend still that the second condition, that the applicant conduct a geotech study to determine the depth of compacted road base be used for the access drive and build the access drive accordingly within minimum of 8-inch depth, and that the applicant shall meet all conditions of the Weaver Fire District. Are there any questions for me?
I got a question. Go figure. Under 156.003 subdivision, it says the division of any tract, lot, or parcel of land owned at the time of the adoption of this chapter as an undivided tract by one individual or by joint tenants or tenants in common or by tenants by the entirety into 3 or more lots. So how does this qualify as a subdivision?
That is good. I thought we addressed that in our updated code, actually, but I can look. So under state code, any property that is from one parcel to any additional parcels would be considered a subdivision. Can you give me that code reference and I'll take a look at it?
It's 156.003.
Is this under subdivision?
It's under definitions.
Yeah, under the subdivision definition.
Yes.
Subdivision regulations.
You ran. There should be music playing right now, like elevator music or something.
I'm thinking. Yeah.
I say the applicant is here if you have any
There's no
questions while I'm looking this up.
Well, we can't ask you questions while you're looking something up.
Yeah.
Oh, I was to say the applicant is here if you have
Oh,
any questions for
okay.
them.
Know that I have questions. Does anybody have questions for the applicant?
You know,
I've just got a question. Being one of the new guys, who takes care of that road? The easement.
The
That would be for him then.
Okay.
Yeah,
That's on my
so
list.
I can
of
answer that real
questions
quick.
too.
The access drive, it'd be required for the owner of that lot to maintain. And so eventually the first lot is owned by the property owner that's currently subdividing. Eventually, when it's recorded and divided and they sell, they will have to, the new private property owner would be responsible for that maintenance.
Okay.
So on the trail, do you know what the plan? Because some of the trail goes through the slough in different areas, not just here, but is the plan to pipe and build over the slough, or is the plan to build adjacent to the slough?
I would say at this point, it's to be determined. We have one more property that we'd have to fit the gap through. It's likely that it might be a little bit of both, where there's some sections that are piped that the trail goes over and other sections that the trail would be adjacent.
Because I know there was a concern brought up about having the trail next to that access road.
Yeah, is there some type of blockage? or-
And yeah, is there some sort of a barrier, or is it going to be, are people going to walk through the road? Does that become part of the trail, that private road, or is it built adjacent to?
The trail will not be on their private drive. The easement itself that's being recorded is only being, the only public access, is not public access, but the access that is being allowed on it is,
Solely for maintenance.
yeah,
So
solely for maintenance.
the city is the only one that can put their vehicle on there to do
Correct. It wouldn't be
maintenance.
open to the public.
Okay.
And we obviously, there would be some concern about, with any trail that goes adjacent to a roadway or driveway, about making sure there's proper separation and making sure that that the trail itself, that people don't wander off onto private property. And so that would be taken into consideration of the design when we get to that point.
And so that would be the city's responsibility.
Mhm.
Okay.
But again, the easement for maintenance already exists.
Correct.
Prescriptively.
There's a
Sort of.
Yep. Yeah, we have. Yes, we do have a prescriptive right to maintain the slough.
Why don't we worry about the definition of subdivision later on? So. we
Yeah.
can-
I do think that's something, I know in state code, it's clear that you're not able to split a lot unless you follow subdivision process. Cities have the ability to choose other properties. What I'm actually assuming has happened, but maybe we have never corrected, is we probably had at one point a lot split measure within our subdivision code. And the definition that's currently in the code is probably a hangover or, left over from that process, which we no longer have a lot split. And so my opinion would be that the subdivision process, based on how state code defines it, that would be our subdivision process is probably the best route to handle this, so they could record the property or record the plat properly.
I don't understand how the trail access isn't part of the same driveway because unless they're tearing out a bunch of bushes and covering it and piping it.
So the easement access
Right.
is on the road. So if the city needs to go and maintain the slough or the trail at some point, they would use that road to get in.
Right.
But
I'm thinking of the people
the
using
people
the
going,
trail.
so the city would TBD, right, on how they're gonna
Yeah.
build that.
Will that be addressed though?
Yeah, that would be part of that would be something that we would address. Typically, when we go into trail design, we like to work with the adjacent property owners, particularly in cases like this where there could potentially be conflict. And so I want to say we don't have a design at the moment, but by the rights of access, the parcel A, once the trail is developed, the public would have access to that property when the city opens it up for public access, but they would not have access on lot 2 on the stem. And we would want to design it in a way that would prevent conflict as much as possible.
Okay.
I guess the point being is there's not gonna be a trail through there until that slough is piped.
Correct. The slough is either piped or we acquire additional property or we are able to design it in such a way that we can keep the slough open without.
Additional property to the south.
Yes. Correct.
So we don't know yet how wide the trail would be either, right?
Typically, our standard is 10 feet for a trail, which is normally why we require the 20 feet because it allows for the flexibility and buffering on each side, or if there are other features that we want to incorporate into the trail, that gives us space to do that.
Is this map updated to show the direction of the house on lot 2?
Yes, I believe so.
Okay. Yeah, all right. I thought they had to be east facing in the front.
The front setback just has to be on the east side.
Yeah, what our code reads.
I thought I read that in.
Maybe.
Yeah, because our
Facing south.
Yeah, so the front line, under the definition for front line, the property line of the lot toward which the front line of the main building faces or may face. I think generally speaking, I don't know if, as long as they met the setbacks, if there would be much. I don't know if the code is clear enough to require the home to face east necessarily. But as long as the setbacks are set in such a way that it meets the standard.
Right. Either way, I guess my big concern is the fire department turnaround. Is that going to be a driveway?
So typically under the fire turnaround, when we record those easements, there is not supposed to be any parking on those.
Okay.
And that will handle during the final plat.
All right. Thank you. Anybody else have any questions? Or any questions for the applicant? Right. Well, with that, if there's nothing else. I'll entertain a motion.
I will make a motion to, are we approving or recommending approval?
It's
No,
an
we're approving.
approval.
Okay. So I'll just reference this guy here.
Or not approving, depending on which way you want to go on it.
I'll make a motion to approve the preliminary subdivision plan for the Isom subdivision, and granting a special exception for the creation of a flag lot, finding that the flag lot plans comply with West Haven City Code 157.617 flag lots with the following conditions. The plan has been updated to show the front setback and the east side and the rear setback on the west side of lot 2. The applicant shall conduct a geotech study to determine the depth of the compacted road base to be used for the access drive and build the access drive accordingly with a minimum of 8 inches of depth. And that the applicant shall meet all conditions of the Weber Fire District. Any other conditions that I missed? No.
I don't think so.
I'll second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. All in favor, say aye.
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 Any opposed? Nay.
Yeah, I got an A in there.
Oh. You nayed too early, is that what you?
Yeah, I get the thing on there. So
Yes, I nayed. All right, motion carries. Item number 11, discussion, possible change to the planning commission schedule for April 8th. I know that, Stevens.
Yeah, thank you. So this upcoming meeting, our typical schedule has our next meeting on April 8th. However, Damien and I are going to be out of town at a planning conference with events in that evening. And so we have a couple applications that came in over the weekend that would facilitate a meeting on that date. So we're hoping that we can maybe reschedule it, or I think my recommendation, if the planning commission is available, bump it a day early to April 7th. That would be a Tuesday. And so I guess my question is from the planning commission, Amy will be here, and so she can cover for us if you still want to do it on the 8th, but me and Damien just won't be available.
Didn't you say we had quite a few things that could be coming up?
We have a zone change that got filed that we would schedule for the 8th, and they met the deadline for the 8th. We also potentially have 1 or 2 other applications that could be on the agenda, depending on if they're able to get us everything or address everything within our reports and sufficiently.
So are you proposing April 7th, Tuesday?
That would be my
Okay.
recommendation, but
I'm fine with that.
I'm good with it.
I can Zoom on the 7th.
I may be a tad late, but I can do it.
Do it.
My calendar.
George, you gotta be there. We gotta have you.
I'll be attending by Zoom that week, anytime during the week. So
Matter? Okay.
suit yourselves, please.
Yeah, I'm good. I'm good for Tuesday, the 7th.
Right. 7th it is.
okay, we have a couple public hearings. And depending on how one of our discussions is, we may have on the patio home. If you want to move that to public hearing, we will make sure we get those advertised. If we advertise tomorrow, the 7th, we'll still have plenty of time to do that. So
There's no work sessions that day, right? Because
correct.
I'll be in training as well.
I hope not.
Yep. Yeah, we won't. We'll plan on not doing any. Well, at least we won't do any work sessions prior
Okay,
to the agenda.
thank you.
Righty. Item number 12, discussion to amend home occupation city code. Yeah, well, don't be greedy. Waive the air conditioning over here, would you?
So this one's
You know,
finally me.
I know it's you.
Damien.
So as we discussed a couple sessions ago, we are proposing an amendment to the home occupation code. And this is a staff initiative, so this is not from an applicant. And our purpose is really just to provide some better balance between individual property owners' rights as well as neighbors and the community property rights. Some of the changes that we've made since we last discussed, I'll just go through the list from beginning to end. In 157.881, the applicability section, we made an amendment to subsection D, where farming and agricultural zones does not require a home occupation business license in accordance with the zoning regulations of their respective subchapters. So we did put that in there just to reference their respective subchapters. I guess just as a reminder for future staff, which you guys don't have to worry about anytime soon because I'm going to be here for a long time. And also any readers of the code that they'll know to reference those subsections for those regulations. And then we made some amendments in the required conditions subsection as well, 157.882. I guess there was a clerical error. We just didn't letter the subsections correctly. That was corrected. Yeah, it looks right now. And we've also made an amendment to subsection E. We've just expanded that definition of what kind of vehicles need to be parked in a garage or behind the front face of the home. So now it reads that all business-related utility vehicles, specialized work vehicles, and marked business vehicles and trailers need to be parked behind the front face of the home. We also made an amendment to subsection F, where now it reads that no more than 2 customers, clients, or other business visitors. So we just expanded on that definition of what exactly a business visitor is. But no more than 2 visitors' vehicles shall be at the property at any time, and said vehicles shall not park on the street, but may utilize the driveway for parking. And then I also included that this provision is not meant to preclude stacked or pick up or drop off parking for home preschools and daycares. Stacked is
What
like,
is stack pickup or drop off?
it's when the vehicle becomes it's no longer in motion, but the vehicle's not turned off, so it's not in a designated parking space, but it's in designated stacking, kind of like a queue for a drive-through restaurant. And that is typically the type of traffic that you'll see most prevalent for these types of uses.
Okay, have we captured that in the definition sections of this?
No, we haven't.
I'd recommend we do.
Okay.
Me and Damien have talked a little bit about this. We don't know. We're doing some more exploration on how to better define that, because right now our code is very quiet on how that pickup and drop off is supposed to be happening. And so we've been looking into some other codes, and this was kind of our placeholder for right now that we're planning on, especially if the planning commission would like, we're planning to explore some maybe more detailed or defined explanation for how that drop off and pickup is supposed to take place.
I suppose you could write the verbiage such that what you just described.
Mhm.
If you're waiting in line with the
Stacking.
motor running, whatever, and it's not actually parked.
Yeah, we can definitely add that to the definitions section.
Anyway, however you guys plan on dealing with that, I just recommend either putting verbiage in there, just make it clear what we're intending, because
Yep.
stacked parking, I was thinking, you know, the way my wife drives, that's two cars parked on top of each other. She's not online, so I'm good.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's a good recommendation. Think so when we bring that back, if we do make amendments to other sections, because we were considering also making an amendment to the home daycare or home preschool sections to address this, then kind of like with our self-storage facilities, we'll just make multiple amendments to multiple different sections with one proposal. We were trying to avoid that, but I think that this is, I think this is something we should follow up on and take action on. Yep. We also made an amendment to subsection I. No more than one employee who does not live at the residence may report to the residence for regular business operations. So this no longer precludes or prevents any home occupation that has remote employees. And with that, we don't put a cap on how many employees that a business might have. We just put a cap on how many employees will report regularly to the home or the residence.
So does that mean no more than one employee at a time?
Yes.
Or no more than one employee?
Well, so regularly would be like if a home daycare, you had some hired help, that you wouldn't have more than one hired hand continuously reporting to the business. But if you did have more than one employee report at any one time, you're still limited to those two business visitors at any given time.
Maybe we just need to clarify that it's like at a time. Because you could potentially, because right now, I think you see what George is reading. Right now, it just defines that you can only have one designated employee. I think that you could interpret that way.
I got 5 employees, but only Fred can come to my house.
Yep.
Yeah, that is how it's written. And if approved right now, that's how it would be. But we can definitely change that language.
Yeah. I think we can just clarify that it's one employee at a time.
Yeah. Well, as it's written right now, up to 2 employees could report, but just one would be regular, if that makes sense. Because of the limited or the parking limitation, no more than 2 business visitors can show up at any given time. And an employee.
But I would think if he was an employee, that would be different from a visitor, a customer that's visiting.
Yeah, unless we expanded that language. So what would you rather see? Would you rather see no more than one employee at a time, or should we expand that language?
It's easier to enforce. Probably vehicles, right? Obviously.
Yeah, I would say so is the, or which one do you think is easier to enforce?
Vehicles.
Yeah, I would agree with that too, is the 2 vehicle max.
Yeah, I mean, I think I guess maybe one thing to take into consideration is, I know like sometimes like neighbors will open up businesses together and will operate out of one home. And then at those points, they're not driving a vehicle. A lot of times they're walking, which I don't know if we care if you have a neighbor that walks to a home to coordinate business activities in that home. Because I think we're more concerned with necessary maybe impact to community, which is more so by parking and
Parking
vehicle.
cars.
I think I see a neighbor that has a home business in and out, but I see 2 employees arrive together in the same vehicle and then they take off in their other ones. But it's like only still one vehicle is arriving. So
Yeah, I think that's a great
Well,
point. And
that is a
that's
great
kind of
point.
what I'm talking about is what is the intent here is to limit the traffic And you do that, I think, by talking about vehicles rather than employees, because I could come with 5 employees in my car and one car parked there, and we go into the boss and he says, okay, do A, B, C, D for the day. You 5 guys, A, B, C, D, E,
Yes.
you 5 guys. And, you know, if our intent is to limit the number of cars, then, you know, 1 vehicle.
Well, I think,
If it's,
I'm sorry.
we just don't want 5 people, then that's, to me, those are kind of 2 different things. What are we really trying to
Yeah.
do? And let's write the language specific to what it is that we're trying to do.
So I would say that we're trying to do both. We're trying to limit both personnel and vehicles. So the solution I'm thinking right now, and you can tell me if this captures what you're thinking, is that we limit all business-related utility vehicles. Oh, sorry, that's not it. Sorry, where's visitors at? Goodness, who organized this code?
Yeah.
I is what you're looking at
But
partially.
I also think it ought to be consistent. If it's visitors and people,
is.
you know, it doesn't matter if they're employees or
Yeah,
buy for coffee and cake, you know, or whatever.
yeah. And
So, or pick up their latest whatever bill from the guy or something, you know.
mhm.
I think it ought to be the same for both. If it's number of people, number of vehicles, I don't think it matters if they're there to pick up the bill for the work done, or if they're there to pick up their work order for the day and what they're supposed to be doing for the business. That's kind of the way I see it. To me, it just makes sense.
Okay. So what I was thinking is amending this to the business-related vehicles that are limited to only 2 at the home at a time is we would, or visitors, I should say, not business-related vehicles. That's a separate section. But the visitors would also include employees. So customers, clients, employees, or other business-related vehicles, no more than 2 vehicles at a time. But it remains that only 1 employee who reports regularly to the residents may be permitted, but no more frequent. And we'll present something better when this comes to a regular meeting, and it's by no means set in stone at that point either.
So I think what you're, now I get it. What you're trying to say with I is no more than 1 employee can come work at that home.
Yes. Mm-hmm.
Got it.
And I'll clarify that language as well.
Can you park 1 car in the garage, then a 2-car show?
Well, that's where it kind of becomes difficult to enforce, is, differentiating.
Let's mess with George.
Okay.
Yeah, don't try and answer it.
I think they're separate.
Well, the truth is these regulations do become difficult.
They're hard to enforce.
And it really does depend on.
I was just thinking of the gentleman was just here, the enforcement. How is he gonna, he's your worker, he's a
Yeah.
visitor,
We
Wait a
rely on
minute,
calls.
what are you? Let's make it easier for him.
It really gets to the point where it becomes a nuisance. Neighbors will inform us, and that's when that triggers that investigation. Okay, we also amended a couple subsections of the special restrictions, 157.883. So subsection A2, pet boarding, is still disallowed, except as it's already permitted in A1 and A2. So it is a permitted or conditional use. It's as permitted in one of those 2 zones. So whether they're permitted or conditional, they remain permitted or conditional by reference. Subsection A3, we've also expanded this list, and we've included trailers, RVs, and we took out construction equipment rental, and now it's just equipment rental because
Covers it.
Yep. It's a more broad umbrella term, and we want to capture more, not less. A9, the retail sales. I know this was kind of funky before, but we don't want any retail sales floor except as an accessory use to a permitted home occupation. So we're thinking like, a small retail associated with a salon or something, or if otherwise permitted in the zone, because produce stands, this is what we talked about before. Produce stands are already permitted in agricultural zones. There's also a conditional use in the agricultural zones is a nursery too, so they could sell plants as long as they're grown on property. So that's already captured in the list of permitted and conditional uses in those zones. And so there were no other amendments made in 157.883. We did make a couple last amendments for the exceptions. And that's 157.884, subsection A1, the use of any space outside of the primary residential building. So what we did here was we just took out the accessory, the mention of an accessory building as being a potential for a conditional use, and just generally any space outside of the primary residential home could potentially be used with the business upon condition of a conditional use permit. And we didn't specify anything beyond that, but we kept the provision that if it is allowable, it's allowable at a max of 25% of the total property area. And again, that's just to limit commercial uses and their impact in residential and agricultural neighborhoods. And then we also amended A2, the retail sales of goods that are grown or crafted on a property in a residential zone. So specifically, this would allow it in a residential zone and only a residential zone because, well, the uses that we're trying to capture are already permitted in agricultural zones. We still want that behind the front face of the home. We don't think it's necessarily appropriate to have a sales floor or any kind of booth, unless it's a lemonade stand, which doesn't even require a business license. We just don't want that in a residential subdivision in front of the home, being more prominent than the home. And that is it. We did leave we left automobile repair as a conditional use. So it's a use in here that has additional conditions. It doesn't necessarily require a conditional use permit, but it's left in the special restrictions section. So if that is an amendment that the commission feels inclined to make, that is something I think that some staff would definitely support if you wanted to remove it entirely.
I've been on the fence on this for quite some time with regard to vehicle repair in residential areas. And I just really struggle with that. But at the end of the day, I think, and I've had some experience with folks I know in around the city that have had significant issues with that exact thing. And I think agricultural areas, and that's kind of what I was talking to Dan about, trying to get a read on agricultural versus residential. I think it's okay and would be acceptable in agricultural areas, but after much thought and consideration, I just have a hard time with it being conducted in residential area where, especially on some of these larger lots, the homes are, we've even seen it with the landscaping business in A1 going in next to homes that look like a park in their backyard. And, you know, I don't know how the rest of you feel, but for me, I think we ought to restrict it to agricultural where that kind of thing is, you know, is much more common and, you know, somebody out running an impact is not likely to be noticed because the farmer next door is out running his hay baler. You know, so that's my take on it. The folks that are already doing it, they're going to be grandfathered. They can continue to do it under the current conditions that they're authorized to do it. But once that, you know, discontinues, then, you know, in residential areas, just wouldn't be doing it anymore.
George, I respectfully disagree. How's that? I think, just because I think if you have in the provisions allowed, if they're behind a gated area in a closed garage or shop, 2 cars minimum, because I have a friend that he's had to run one for about 10 years. He's got a conditional permit in West Haven. And he needed to because financially. He's been a mechanic for 50 years. Is there probably been some abuses from others throughout the city? Sure. But I think we could let those people, if it needed to be in a residential, keep it 1 or 2 cars in the back, in their shop, the door closed, and you can't hear his pneumatic gun or his compressor. To be honest, his compressor is outside and you can't hear it because it's got soundproofing in the exterior building. It's like a shed type thing. But anyway, I feel, I think we can allow that just with some strict guidelines. That way we end up like Linda's talking about the place with 20 cars and stuff. But if that guy's doing brake jobs and he's needed to survive, and I just think it's hard enough nowadays to make a living, but if someone wanted to do that just to make a little extra side money and kept their nose clean and did it like we asked them to, I think we should let them. So maybe I'm more on the right side of this one.
Yeah.
That's my point.
Anybody else? I got to say, I am really opposed to the residential part of it, and here's why. A family's going to come in. They're going to play. Hey, it's on.
I'm sorry, you hardly hear it.
They're going to be paid.
Thank you.
Closer.
It was on. They're going to be paying upwards of $1 million for a 2-story home with a basement on 1 acre. Their next door neighbor has 1 square foot more than an acre, and with 5-foot setbacks, puts a shop there and is going to be using pneumatic things or grinders or all these various sundry other things. And, you know, brake jobs is totally different, but, you know, I don't know how to make a specific list of what you can and
But if you
can't
did it inside the building, right? And you did it to the hours.
No,
he
I
was talking
get
about.
that, but my thought is you're paying a lot of money, and I know the argument is commercial property is expensive, but residential property is not cheap either.
That is
You move into an agricultural zone, you're expecting to hear these kind of vehicles. But if you move into a residential zone, it's like it says in the opening paragraph, maintaining the peace, quiet, and domestic tranquility. And so that's where I stand on it. That's
fair. That's
Say the animals louder than the car.
But I feel like that's it's part of keeping it country. You want to move to West Haven, country living.
And then
Yeah.
You have the farmer working on his tractor. You have the farmer working on his cars in his shop, and there's no restriction. So if the theme is, I mean, well, I think we have it restricted to agricultural, don't we?
Well, no, it's
Or anything in an acre, unless greater than 1 acre.
It's restricted by property size.
I mean, I don't know. I tend to agree with not being too strict on how you use your property. And it's part of learning when you buy property. If you're going to be a property owner, you got to know what's going on around you.
I don't know.
You'll learn the more.
Most people learn that the hard way.
Yeah. But I do agree. I mean, we've been down this road multiple times with this particular ordinance. And I think if we can just make it strict, like I really don't see. I think if we can make it strict and easily enforceable, then we should be able to allow it.
Yep.
Hours where you do the work, it has to be in a, if we want to say, hey, you have to do it in a shop with the doors closed and you have to, if you have a compressor, you got to make sure that there's some sort of a sound barrier to protect from that, then we make those restrictions and make it as,
Yeah, and if they keep the hours, he doesn't start till like 9 or 10 in the morning anyway, because he's older.
yeah.
He's almost 80. And so, and he's knocked it off by 4 or 5 anyway, but that's probably a perfect case. So,
Yeah.
And I guess I'm a little bit biased because the case that I know about, the guy, the neighbor who's being assaulted by the individual running, he has a repair business, a home occupation business where he repairs heavy equipment.
oh,
It's supposed to be done inside lifts, cherry pickers, those kinds of things, all supposed to be done indoors. And he's constantly, or was, I don't know the current status, I haven't talked with him in a few years, but this guy, he has his own, you'll see his cars, I won't name him, but he puts cars down in the West Haven Car Show himself, And so he's got his own shop and he's got, all the stuff to do extensive fabrication and modification of automobiles. He's even got a paint booth
wow.
inside of his shop. His next door neighbors out running impact guns and got equipment, and he's only supposed to have 2 in the yard at any given time, and he's got 3 and 4, and
Sure.
to where this guy can't even go on his patio and grill consistently or whatever. And they got a beautiful patio. And now it's on the back of code enforcement to keep coming over there. And I just hate to put that on the back of code enforcement, but I think if you've got responsible guy,
Yeah.
and I do stuff in my shop,
Sure.
and I got all this stuff in my shop, I can make noise too,
Right. And I know
So
about
I
you.
could be just as guilty as the other guy,
Right.
but I think, but I try to be a good neighbor.
Right. And that's part of being a good neighbor, but
But my livelihood doesn't depend on
Sure.
me getting this out and done by 8 o'clock tomorrow morning. So I
Right.
don't have to work till midnight or 10 o'clock or even after 5
Yeah.
o'clock or something in order to satisfy a customer and get paid so I can make my rent payment.
right.
So, I would think that one of the restrictions that we should put on this is we should put on there some, and since code enforcement is mostly done by complaint, if not entirely done by complaint, that after a given number of complaints, that the business license or the special use permit
jeopardy.
is revoked.
Yeah.
And there's no ifs, ands, or buts about it, Third time that, code enforcement has to come by your house and tell you to shut off your operations at 7 o'clock because there's a 5 o'clock restriction on it, you forfeit your license to do that.
Yeah.
And I think it has to be that strict in order to preserve the peace, tranquility, and life, whatever words were given there.
Whatever's quoted in that.
Well-being and whatnot. But I think, I think we just need to have something very rigid so it's
Sure.
not just extended over a period of time, with no end in sight.
If they don't have being a good neighbor as their goal, then they'll always be ticking their neighbor off. They'll always be finding loopholes. And, all of us know, I don't know if you know this, there's a study, our HR handbooks for my work, I've been there 33 years. Most of the rules in the handbooks are created because of one person.
Yeah.
And all of us get to suffer because of one idiot that decided to wear Speedo to work. Now we can't wear shorts. You know what I mean? It's just like,
Yeah.
they had to go through and define what shorts are. And it's like, come on. But, I'm kidding aside, but that's what's caused a lot of these rules because you got people that don't care about the others.
you know.
But I think if you lived in a neighborhood where your neighbors are more tolerant
Sure.
and you're, oh, the guy's got to earn a living and so he's got to
Yeah.
keep the stuff going until midnight so he can get this car out the door or when the guy comes to pick it up at 8 in the morning.
Yeah.
If your neighbors are more tolerant, then they're not going to be calling code enforcement.
Sure.
And that's fine too.
Wow.
Anybody else?
We beat this one good.
Well, I don't know that we came to any hot and heavy conclusion because
You
this is
beat
just for
dead
discussion.
horse. Yep.
So I don't know what direction most of us want to go.
I like having it there. I think I like people being able to use their property. I hate the code enforcement, so I don't know which way. I really do like having people being able to use their property. And it falls on, responsibly, it falls on code enforcement. I don't know that there's a way out of that other than to write as specific as possible. I think that's what staff has tried to do.
I agree.
I'm sure there's many loopholes in there that we have missed that they will find.
I think testing vehicles on the highway on streets is a bad idea. You mentioned it last time that we have bad actors, unfortunately, but I don't know how else to monitor it unless Damien gets very specific. And don't ask me how.
Mhm.
You, Damien?
It might be the police officer in you, maybe.
Let James come up with the wording for it.
I don't mind doing that. But who doesn't like getting on a Harley and open it up, just let it go? Come on, that's a lot of fun.
My husband would.
Code enforcement.
He's gonna chase me down and taser me, but anyway.
Don't wear your Speedos.
It's a bad visual, I know.
Always a visual, you're just, oh.
Some friendly, yeah.
Damien, do you need any more?
No, I feel like I have enough.
Got a headache?
It'll still be in here when I bring it to the regular meeting. I'll work with Dan and I'll get some additional restrictions beyond the 5 that are already provided. That are appropriate, and balancing those individual property rights with protecting the neighborhood and the community and the character of residential and agricultural neighborhood.
And Damien, I sincerely, I will help you write that.
Mhm. I appreciate that. I can
So-
bounce that off with you. I have everyone's
Yeah,
email.
I'll help you
address.
write it because that way I don't want to be the one that, it's easy to throw rocks sitting on the fence, but get in the game, get some skin in the game.
Yeah.
All right.
All right. Item number 13. Thanks to Melinda, discussion to amend patio home building height city code. Go ahead, Steve.
Yeah, I can provide a I can provide kind of an overview why this is being presented today. So West Haven, we have a patio home zone, which essentially allows for smaller homes sometimes to be built, or for homes to be built on smaller lots, to be built within the city. There are some provisions in them to allow for attached or detached within the zone. Currently, the height restriction listed in it allows for patio homes to be maximum 25 feet and indicates that living space may be allowed above a garage. However, there's no story restriction except for homes with 0 lot lines. Members of the Planning Commission and also the West Haven City Mayor have have brought this issue to staff, concerning that it was intended that the ordinance be placed so to limit these homes to a single-story structure. So as such, staff has prepared, or we have prepared a draft and are seeking feedback from the Planning Commission. So within the proposal, this is within our code 157.416, maximum structure height. As it currently reads, dwellings or other main buildings shall be 25 feet. Habitable attic space is permitted over a garage area. And accessory buildings 15 feet. So as it could be seen, there's no story restriction within this section. And as long, technically, a strict reading of this would show that a building must be 25 feet, which I don't think is the intention or would be our interpretation of it. So in order to clarify this, based on, but it does seem clear that the sentence following the habitable attic space is permitted over a garage area. It does seem like the intention of that was for it to be limited to a single story. It just isn't clear that it doesn't say that. And so what we're proposing is to change that sentence into no building or dwelling shall exceed the height of 25 feet or consist of more than one story. Basements and below grade habitable space are strictly prohibited. My initial draft that I had kept in the language about habitable space above an attic. However, after some back and forth with the city attorney on the language, we decided to unless the planning commission would like us to try to reintegrate it, we removed that language because it may bring I feel like we'd have to address it a little bit more clearly that essentially we'd be allowing another story and limited exceptions. And that's something we can do. However, just limited to one story is a cleaner code that would prohibit that, livable space above a garage. So right now what we're just looking for is, this is just a workshop, so we're looking for feedback and direction, and if the planning commission likes this direction that we're going. And then generally speaking, if there's not much change, then we would plan on advertising for a public hearing on this change for the next meeting.
So the intent is to limit habitable space to the ground level, period.
Yep,
No basement.
no basement.
Yeah.
And no over the garage bonus room.
Correct.
I would, if it were I think I'd take the word habitable space out of here because,
I was
I
gonna say,
have
what is
seen-
habitable?
well, I have seen below grade, it's not necessarily habitable, but it is utility room
Yeah.
below grade.
This would allow for like a crawl space or a utility. As it's currently written.
Why? Why allow anything below grade?
Well, crawl
I-
spaces.
Crawl space,
Cheap.
storage.
Utilities, right?
Yeah,
Well,
that's
no, I'm
typically
talking about
cheaper.
somebody actually has a walk down basement where the HVAC and the water heater is.
Right.
And,
They made a room out of it?
well, no, but I
Oh.
don't, I mean,
When I lived in Hooper, I had I had water, not a water softener. I had my furnace and air conditioner were in the crawl space. There was a crawl space, and then it had about another 3 foot deep concrete vault, swimming pool basically, or the swimming pool maybe was around the vault. And that's where the HVAC stuff set, is inside of that concrete space. But you had to crawl on your hands and knees to get over to it. And once you're there, you could maybe change the filter by kind of standing up, but you couldn't even stand up all the way when you're standing on the concrete enclosure. So and they did that to maximize ground level floor space. So what was once gonna house the HVAC system at ground level was turned into a pantry. The HVAC system went down in the crawl space. So I think that's one instance where you'd have a crawl space, not habitable, but it was useful.
I also think that if the target is kind of the more elderly population for this zone or these homes, a crawl space is better on the knees and the joints than a slab of concrete.
I don't know. I'm not so sure I can crawl on anything.
That's true.
No, that was all. I think one story is fine. And in my neighborhood, we do have a second story option for people.
Is that above the garage or?
Uh-huh.
Okay.
And if we were to allow something like that, I would use verbiage of 15 by 15 single room would be allowed up there. Because people do have bonus rooms, but it's only a bonus room, not all bedrooms and bathrooms upstairs.
Yeah.
My concern with this, Stephen, was that we put in a zone that was intended for patio homes, and we created a high density zone that someone's now gonna come in and put whatever they want on it.
Yeah, I essentially our patio home zone is really more like an R6. Yeah, just a residential development with allowed up to about 6 units an acre.
Mhm. And they're stacked right next to each other. And now we've got a 2-story in there, and I get it. I went to see if there was anything in building code, right? To see if it defined a patio home, and everything I could find lists a patio home as 1-story or 1.5 story. But it's not, we didn't define that.
No.
It also says habitable space can be permitted above the garage. That doesn't limit them doing a 2-story by saying that? Doesn't say it could be permitted above the whole.
Yeah, when I talked to the city attorney, and my general experience is that typically, if we're not outright restricting something, then normally it is allowed. And so, like the height limit, 25 feet, is a clear restriction, while the bonus room over the garage is
Not,
more, yeah, it's not a clear restriction. It's enabling language without actually restricting any additional use.
Okay, so we just need to be really clear in restricting whatever we're gonna do.
We just don't allow it at all.
So in practical purposes, what's the difference between a patio home that's 25 feet tall, that has no habitable space over the garage, and a patio home that is 25 foot tall and does have habitable space over the garage? And what's the thinking behind saying you shouldn't be having a bonus room over the garage?
The only the conversation was more of just making just clarity within the definition. I think we can essentially what we were looking at is that if we wanted to allow like a bonus room above a garage or in an attic, something like that, we could work that in, but we'd want it to be defined more clearly with the limits of that. Whereas because right now what we would essentially how the code's written is, or how we're proposing limiting it to a single story, we'd want to make sure any exception to that was very clear in that standard. And we felt like the current language of habitable space above an attic or a habitable space permitted over a garage area was not clear enough, essentially, that there could be a lot more room for interpretation. So if that's something we wanted to do and allow, I'm perfectly fine with that. We just need to define it further, and I'd prefer the planning commission to give some direction.
He's trying to get out, what's the objective? What are we trying to achieve here?
Trying to stop somebody from putting 3 bedrooms above their garage, which is basically what has happened.
Well, I think the whole house too.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I think we just need to define a patio home. We've got a patio home zone that doesn't mean anything right now.
Yeah.
It is garbage.
It is not.
It is
defined at all.
we've named something that doesn't exist, and we are shoving whatever we want in there right now. And so we've created a zone for someone to pack as many houses as they want in there as they can,
Yeah.
but without any restrictions, obviously, like it was written without any restrictions on it.
Well, currently it says it can't be over 25 feet.
Correct.
That's not going to change.
Correct. So I think the real
So
objective,
if we want to say you can only have habitable space on the ground level, and that's what our objective is, then say that. And if we, 25 feet, habitable space, ground level only,
Mhm.
Yeah, so
I'm just trying to understand this is all, what's our objective and how do we get there from here to there when they're both 25 feet tall? And
think
if we
this
don't
does-
want habitable space over the garage, is that just because we don't want this habitable space or we don't want 2 stories that are 25 feet tall?
I think looking at it, like when, who was here? Andrew was here? Jeff, were you here when we did the patio home zone?
No, I was in the audience
So
when you guys did.
correct me if I'm wrong, is that it was the idea of a one level slab on grade home, right? That was a patio home. And then bonus room was like, and that's the problem. It just seemed like very obvious, like a 1 to 1.5 story home, like a patio home, like they're all over. We were referencing the senior living areas all over the city. So that was, the picture, right? Which didn't end up on paper in the definition. And so that was even challenged when this neighborhood came in to start with.
Yeah.
And so, I guess, I don't know. So the definition has to be there, like
Yeah.
exactly very restrictive. I don't know that I care about a bonus room. Like if we define what that is, if it's, I'd be very specific if that helps. I don't know, but a patio home was like a slab on grade.
Did you,
Obviously not obvious to everyone else.
so as the way it's written, could you do a 2-story patio home? Is that allowed right now?
That's
Yeah.
right, yeah.
All the way
that-
across?
Yeah.
So you could do that.
yeah, essentially, like I said, our code is really written.
Basement.
Which is not a patio
And,
home.
and a basement.
Right.
So I don't know how that is a patio.
No yard work. I'd be awesome.
Yeah.
Yeah. let me give you that.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, my impression, the first time when I got hired and I read this ordinance, I was like, oh, patio homes. I read through it. I was like, this is just a single family zone essentially with the opportunity to potentially do some attached units. And so I do think that's the key is what the city wants to achieve. Are we really seeking true patio homes? Because if that's the case, if you're really wanting single story, then this change would help achieve that. But if the city itself is fine with a wider range of housing types to be built, which that's what's currently allowed, then we don't necessarily have to make a change. But essentially, this how the code is currently written is, we have like our R2, which is 2 units an acre. This is more like an R6, where you have about 6 units an acre, without any special restriction.
Yeah, I mean, I guess I think to Melinda's point, if we just defined what a patio home is
Specific.
specifically, I think that would cover a lot of what can be
I do
done.
think that this says, basements below grade habitable space are strictly prohibited. So that cuts out the whole basement
Yeah.
theory.
So you add that, just the second layer, there's no second level
Habitable,
allowed.
or just main level habitable only, or something like that.
Could you still
Ground
do a
level.
bonus level above the garage with that wording?
That
And-
would be what we would need to decide for them to put in.
Yeah.
So if we wanted to allow that,
Yeah, I think if you're gonna do a 2-story type, well, not a 2-story, I'm sorry, an upstairs bonus room, you limit it to
Would it,
a bonus room that's 15 by 15.
can't do
or
the whole
whatever
Or the size,
you
the
want.
size of the garage,
Yeah,
There you
the
go.
floor plate of the garage.
Which those are typically
well, the
20
only problem
by
with that
20
is
-ish.
3-car garages.
So
Well, yeah, but
Yeah, no, yeah, bet. There are 3-car garages. They're, in my neighborhood anyway, they're limited
Yeah.
to.
like,
because of the lot sizes, you.
they don't think the size of a window.
Typically, the size, like most like crawl spaces, for example, most of the time they're about 4 feet
Yeah.
tall, and so it's not considered habitable because you can't live down there.
turns out.
There's
the
window,
height is a
windows.
lot Higher than I
A
thought.
bonus over a garage, what would make that
Yeah.
habitable or not
Yeah.
habitable?
That was shocking.
Essentially, if you have like the
Either have to
drywall
be fine.
flooring, because you can a lot of homes have
We
attics
should be able to do this though.
that doesn't
This
have
doesn't seem-
floors or anything. It's
Out of
just
our reach.
insulation essentially.
You guys think it's hard to, I think there's 3 or 4 suggestions, like we could just
Mhm.
make it a patio home.
Yeah.
We just have to define it.
I'm not opposed to something above the garage, although I feel like I don't know.
Is
I don't
there
know.
a
In my
reason
mind,
for why?
in my mind is like if you're buying this home, so it could be single level, single story patio homes, like why would you want something with stairs to climb up above the garage?
People use them for offices or
Yeah.
And
whatever
grandkids.
else.
Storage.
I've seen the
grandkids.
grandkids go down,
Grandkids.
it's
True, yeah.
what grandkids go play.
Yeah, that's true.
Because that's the idea. It was senior living
Right.
without,
Like
without
townhouses.
restricting it to senior living.
There's not all seniors. We got some younger people,
You're
you know,
right.
55?
under 70. I, when I looked at through my old stuff from Nielsen Homes, they had a bonus room that you could have upstairs and it was like 17 by something. And I just think 15 by 15, if we were to do something like that, it limits that space up there if you were gonna, allow it. I'm not advocating one way or the other with that statement. It's just, I think we ought to
Just make it
specifically
specific.
define it.
Stephen, what was the standard size you were saying? Was it 20 by 20? for a
About
bathroom?
for a 2-car garage.
So my thinking on this and starting to dictate what that room size is and what can go in it and what it can be used for is pretty much goes back to what Linda said earlier, I think people ought to be able to use their property. And then I agree with that as long as it doesn't impact the neighbors. And I really agree with it when it doesn't impact the neighbors. And that bonus room can only be 15 by 15 and it can only be used for an office and you can't have a fan that exceeds 5 feet in diameter with 4 blades and three lights,
that far.
that,
That's one.
in my opinion, if you're gonna allow it, you allow it. If you're not gonna allow it, you don't allow it.
That's fair.
Now, to me, a patio home, slab on grade, 1 story, and you're done. And 25-foot height apparently is what everybody thinks is acceptable height.
Way good with
And
We're
so,
talking about a patio home in a specific patio home zone. So I mean, someone has a patio home someplace else,
Yeah.
it doesn't apply, correct?
yeah, if you're in R2, build what you want.
What you want.
Yeah.
It could look like whatever you want. It could be a patio home with single level or a 2-story
To
patio.
a
home.
patio home area. like
Yeah.
The
something.
patio home zone was meant to step like your transitioning zone, right?
Right.
So you're not going from this really high density straight to great big lots. And so the patio home was like that stepping stone. And so that's the intention. That's the intention of it.
Yeah, because if you do this R6 and you had a basement and a second floor, then now you can have 6 people, 8 people living there versus, 2, 3.
And that was one
Yeah,
of the big
patio.
discussions,
Right.
correct?
Yeah.
Oh.
Is that's a very small lot to have a lot of people in one home in that lot.
And I think they asked him to do a traffic study. I don't know if it was ever done based on 2 people living in those homes. Do you know?
I don't know. I don't know that. I mean, their patio homes do typically produce less traffic. A single family home is about 10 trips a day on average. In suburban areas, sometimes it can even be higher. But typically, I think patio homes are closer to townhomes in traffic impact, which is closer to about 6 to 7 trips a day.
Oh. Didn't know that.
I just, if we were to go to allowing an upstairs thing, I don't think I would do it based upon the 2-car garage, because we do have existing 3-car garages and so I would hate for them to be able to do it a size of a 3-car garage, but with the pitches, peaks and everything, I'm not so sure that would even apply. So never mind.
Good
I
discussion.
don't know what the answer is. I just don't.
Do we just
We thought we did.
restrict it entirely and just say, this is what it is?
I'm good with
One
that.
level.
That's true,
Single
because then
story.
if you want to build something bigger or more, then
Yeah.
just go to a,
Then don't build it in a
yeah,
patio
not in
home
a
zone.
patio home zone.
Would R2.
Yeah.
Yeah. So,
Fine with it being restrictive.
No
Yeah,
main
typical.
building or dwelling
Yeah.
shall exceed
Linda,
height of 20
Linda's got it like that.
and
Is it?
It's 3 bedroom.
Is this over in her,
No, they don't have all this stuff.
I think
the
your-
side yard?
I think
So
your
I did one
definition
before they
is
probably would have had a
great.
third car garage if
Yeah.
they wanted, or they had
Sure.
a room there.
One of the trends I've seen over time with some of the zones that we put into place, is we put into place things that, like the mixed use zone from way back, intended to have some mixed use. And the next thing we know, because more profit can be made from putting in high density homes and no commercial and no retail, and it says 12 to 22, and everybody comes in and asks for 22 per acre.
Mhm.
And so my personal feeling is, if we're going to do this thing with patio homes, we need to do what we want it to do. Because if we're going to say, yeah, it can be whatever over the garage at 15 by 15 or 20 by 20, and that's what they're going to do. And so again, I go back to, what is it that we want to do with this thing? And in my opinion, if we want, 1.5 or 2-story homes, then, they get a bonus room, and that's going to be maximized. But if we want the kinds of things that I consider to be a patio home, and it sounds like we're being asked to look at, it's single story, 25-foot height.
Agreed.
I'm good with that.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Did we
okay.
review there last time that no attached walls? I think we did, didn't we?
So there is a zero within the patio
Lot line.
home. There is a zero lot line provision where a developer may do, this is actually where essentially if you do zero lot lines, buildings are attached. That's actually where you're limited to single level, single family homes, zero lot lines may be requested through a development agreement with the city. So that's currently a provision within the code, but they have to go through the development agreement process, which adds discretion.
So if we went back to this one, this was the developer that wanted to put 4.
That was yelling.
Yes, that was screaming. Yes.
Well, he was deaf. I mean, I saw his ear thing.
That,
But boy, he was loud.
he wasn't very kind about it either.
Oh, he
So
was
I don't know
not.
if that had
I
anything
missed
to do
that
with
one.
the hearing.
I
So they
sat
said-
there and I watched this.
So the next time they sent the other guy that was a little more
Yeah,
calm.
yes.
But that was, he's trying to do, I just called it a 4-plex and that was offensive, but, 4,
It's like my cot with the house to share the
Yeah.
one common wall.
that's a 0, but what their original, when they came in for a patio home was a 4-plex. It was
Oh.
4.
Is that kind of like what Green Farms has? Is that right? Because
They
those are
have-
four
Yeah, they do
plexes.
have some at the end of
Yeah.
the real patio homes. They call them attached patio homes.
Yep.
You might want to make note of that wording for future reference.
So if we're gonna fix this, let's make sure that is, I thought we addressed it then. But let's
Yeah,
make
well,
sure
they
we
can-
address it specifically now, what that is. I thought we said one wall. That it could only have one attached wall.
Well, it looks like we ended up that they have to come in with an MDA if they want it, right?
Yep. Yeah. So what the code reads is developers wishing to provide attached single level, single family homes, zero lot lines may request a development agreement with the city, which will outline the provisions under which such homes would be allowed. If the development agreement is approved, allowing zero lot line projects, developers shall be required to maintain the density requirements of the zone, but shall not be required to maintain a minimum lot size for such uses. So my reading, if a developer were to come in to ask me what my interpretation of this would be, there's not limiting language in there that states it can only be one wall, it's just attached.
Let's
It
not
could
have.
be 4.
Yep, it could be a
It
quad.
could be a 4-plex. Don't
Are
mean
we
to be
okay to
offensive.
limit that? No, no, no. No, I just wanna make sure that we do it right, because it's not meant to be like that highest density. and it, not highest, but R6 is pretty dense.
No, technically, sorry, it's 5 units an acre, so it'd be an R5. I misspoke earlier, but but it's
That's still
pretty
dense.
close.
Dense.
I'm fine with the
Do
new
we
word.
want to address the zero lot line thing while we're doing this?
Mm-hmm.
I mean, if you just throw in 2, that it can only be 2 units.
Yeah.
So, yeah,
One
specify
shared
it.
Yeah, you could do like
Even one shared wall is scary because then could they?
You could do
finagle it
4
to-
units.
To share one.
Share a wall.
you could
Sure.
limit it to like duplex or triplex.
Duplex.
Duplex, because we could define that. That's a
Okay.
term that's
I know some areas of the city, we have what they call zero lot line patio homes that are not connected, but the wall of the garage defines the property line, and then the neighbor's side yard is like 8 feet wide, so it's really a zero setback from that property line, and none of the homes are attached. You know, so I think there's multiple.
yeah. I have seen where they do like essentially do a zero setback on one side,
Yes.
except a building separation of 10 feet. And so you technically have a home go all the way out to the lot line, but then there'd be a 10-foot separation.
Yes.
When you do that, a lot of times you do like you need to provide an easement for maintenance on that side.
Yeah.
So that way the owner, if they have to redo their siding, even though it's right up against the property line, they can still address that. But I mean, that is something we could also look at as part of this. We want to further define how that takes place.
Just keep it simple.
Yeah. So I guess what I have here is we'll keep the definition limited to single story, and then I'll update the zero lot line to just duplexes only. And so, you know, they can only share one wall between themselves on one side, and then the other sides have to be free. We'll define. Oh, I have a couple good definition of duplexes, and I'll pull those up and make sure we govern it properly.
But they still have to come in
With an
for,
MDA.
with an MDA.
Is that it's a code? We are opening the code, so you
Yeah.
can make it by right where it's just a allowed use within the zone, or you can make it under development agreement.
I'd rather, I mean, I don't know that if there's another mechanism for us to review it, that's fine, but I think we'd want to have some way of approving it. I don't know if an MDA gets too cumbersome and it's a long process for the city to have to do, then, and there's another avenue to take for it. But I think the thought behind it is that we don't just want to give it to them so they can do whatever they want. We want to see it first.
Yeah, the MDA, so if we were to remove the MDA restriction, it then just becomes an administrative decision. So a property owner could come in with a duplex development, and that would be allowed, depending on how we wrote the code. The MDA makes it a contractual agreement, which adds a legislative element to it. And that gives the city the ability to deny that type of development.
I say keep the MDA. That's my.
Yeah, I was
just-
thinking
Yeah, we
the
can
same
just keep it
thing,
in
because
place.
and hold people,
Accountable.
they're
Okay.
accountable, yes.
Been shocked at what people can go around and you think that you've
Covered it.
covered it and you just haven't.
Yeah.
And there's still, those still be issues, but I would say yes if, I don't know what everybody else thinks, but
Yes.
I would say, I'd just like to add that MDAs are more time consuming to enforce. For instance, I mean, I don't want to call out any specific MDA, but when we get a development proposal, we do have to sift through all that language to see if the use that's proposed is allowed, and then if the development requirement or if the development that's proposed is within those design standards. Whereas if we take the time to really get the product we want with the zoning code, then we don't, like, staff doesn't have to work out an MDA with every developer, and we don't have to bring every MDA to the planning commission and city council. But if you do prefer that level, that method of restriction, then yeah, we can proceed that way. But I
Yeah.
think it does make it more cumbersome,
I mean-
not slightly more cumbersome, but
Damien does raise a good point. My general preference is I don't like governing by MDAs. I prefer governing by just the standards set out in the zone. It just makes it a little bit simpler. It makes it easier. Like, let's say in 5 years, the council changes its mind on setbacks, which that's what happened with Sager Farms, essentially. It makes it easier to just apply the new standard. The MDA's advantages are they do enforce, they do have they do make it more difficult for a future council to change, and defines what a development is. And it also makes sense if you do big master plan development and there's property dedication and maintenance agreements, then MDAs make a lot of sense. So I do think Damien brings up a good point that if there's not a lot else going on, that MDAs do add another cumbersome element to a development review and enforcement.
it essentially becomes every single development has its own zoning code. It's kind of how it acts on the backside. Like if you look at the zoning map and you see all the mixed use zoning in the city, mixed use does require an MDA too. If every single one of those properties were developed, then each one would have its own MDA. So if anything new was proposed, use or development wise, redevelopment wise, we would have to refer or revert back to that zoning code to see if what was proposed fits in their MDA. So it becomes like every single property or every single development does have its own code, and where that code lives is something that staff has to track down, which isn't always easy. And as another example, we had there's an MDA that has two amendments, and they reference a map that was attached to the MDA.
Yeah, there was no.
I didn't have that map.
recorded.
And where that map lived, I don't know. So this specific property that we had a development proposal for, I didn't know if it was subject to that MDA or not, because although, the parameters, development, specifications were set forth in that MDA, that actual map that was supposed to be attached was not. So as for the parcels, it wasn't clear.
So this actually might get to one thing I am planning on bringing to the Planning Commission in the near future as part of our general plan amendment is an update to our multifamily zoning. Right now, our multifamily zoning the density calculations are based on the general plan map. And I wouldn't say that's necessarily best practice. So what I would like to bring forward is essentially breaking out our R3 zone, which is our multifamily zone, into the 3 different zoning designations as referenced on the general plan map. So that way, the general plan map no longer becomes a administrative legally binding document, but more of the recommendation document it is. So that being said, one idea that we could potentially do is if we wanted to kind of step away from the MDA within the zone, is we could create like a patio home 2, and essentially where we allow for duplexes or single family homes. And that I think is more clear on the front end. Like you can rezone it as patio home 1, which is just single family, or patio home 2, which allows for duplexes or single family. And I think that it becomes more clear on the enforcement, and it makes it more clear legislatively on how to pick and choose. But we'd have to create a new zoning to do that, new zone designation, which we can do. And so I think it depends. The planning commission would like to go that direction. I think my recommendation would be to remove the 0 lot line section from this ordinance. And then we just, when we update or bring our multifamily code, we could potentially just bring a patio home to zone or to the planning commission for your consideration as well.
Not allow any 0 lot line in this one at all.
Correct. This would just be strictly single family. It would have to meet the setbacks, all the other standards within the code.
I like that.
That's fine.
Too. Yeah.
Do that. I'd have to sell it to the council, but
They love it.
I'm sure they will.
I think you probably get a agreement with the city council of eliminating MDAs as much as possible.
Oh, I
Yeah.
think so too. I'm just talking about the 0 lot lines thing.
Oh.
Seem to be relatively attached to that.
They like that.
They like 0 lot lines or they don't like
I
0 lot
think they
lines?
do like 0 lot. I mean, I don't think they want us to have them. I think they want the code that is there, but I could be really wrong. It wouldn't be the first time.
It will be coming eventually in patio home too.
Yeah. Yes.
Because
Just rename. Just redefining.
Go home to coming in May 2027.
Or May 30. Oh, wait.
So I guess my question for the commission is moving forward. I can make these changes and we could advertise for a public hearing for our next meeting on the 7th. Or would the planning commission want to see it again before we did that?
See it again.
I think I would like to see it again.
Yeah, I think so,
Before
too.
we go
Okay.
to public hearing.
Great.
Okay. Anybody else got anything? All right. Item number 14, adjournment.
I'll make a motion to adjourn.
Hey.
Yeah. Oh, he said,
I'll second.
sorry, second.
I guess you're gonna say.
All in favor?
Aye.
Hey.
Aye.
I just love watching Jeff's face.
James, are you opposed?
No.
Okay.
Thank you.
Yeah, James is gonna spend.
Motion passes.
We need-
Pass. Aye, aye.